If you're curious about the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict and you would like a story that puts front and forward a human face on that conflict, then today's book just might be for you. Today I'll be reviewing A Day in the Life of Abed Salama, Anatomy of a Jerusalem Tragedy by Nathan Thrall. Welcome back to Spencer Reads Everything. I am your host, Spencer Duncan. Today we're going to be looking at another one of the Pulitzer Prize winners. This time we'll be looking for the category of general nonfiction, Day in the Life of Abed Salama, Anatomy of a Jerusalem Tragedy by Nathan Thrall, which means that it came out just last year, seeing as though it won for this year. For a synopsis of the book, it's worth pointing out that the name actually says a good deal of it. The majority of the book, although not all of the book, is centered around a single day in a tragedy that happens in East Jerusalem in particular. It follows not just this one day, but it starts out by giving a detailed biography of the main character, Abed Salama, and it of course talks about his marriage and having children, and at the center of that is of course this tragedy that happens one day when there's a bus accident, and I will tell you now, this is a bit of a spoiler, that his son does tragically die in the bus accident. And the rest of the book is him trying to figure out what happened, trying to track down his son, and trying to figure out if there's any way in which he can help him before his son, of course, passes away. And then there's a little bit after that that details the aftermath. But that is the bulk of the story. There's really not much more to the synopsis than that. Of course, to tell this story, Nathan Thrall has to give some context as to what exactly is going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, especially in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. So when you're thinking of the modern issue with the fighting in Gaza, this is not exactly related to that. And this is an event that happened long before the events of October 7th. Though I do have a sneaking suspicion that the events of October 7th and the ongoing conflict in Gaza probably played a role in why this book became one of the favorites and eventually the winner for the Pulitzer Prize of General Nonfiction. The things that I did enjoy about this book, first of all, it is pretty easy to follow. At no point was I bogged down with information, which sometimes can be really challenging, especially when you're dealing with a foreign place where a lot of the names you may not be familiar with, not just the names of individuals, but the names of locations or ideas or concepts. Any of that can make it a bit of a challenge, but I found it pretty easy to follow. Additionally, I did find it a very emotionally moving book to read, especially when you were dealing with the death of someone's young son. A few of the things that I didn't exactly care for in this book would probably be the lack of good contextualization. I actually have a PhD in pre-modern Islamic world, so I'm not an expert by any means of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but I definitely have had a long-running interest in it. And even I felt like there wasn't necessarily enough information given to give a good contextualization of exactly what was going on during this time period. On top of that, I actually really struggled with the protagonist. I didn't find him a likable character. I found him highly problematic from beginning to end. And I think maybe that was one of the points the author was trying to make, that as we deal with such a complicated and tragic area as the West Bank and the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that not everyone has to be likable. That may have been one of the reasons why he chose this individual to outline. The tragedy at the center of the book actually takes the lives of, I think it was 6 children total. So why Abed Salama was the one that was followed, and like I said, I didn't actually find him very likable, I'm not sure, but maybe the author had a reason for that. Something else that I didn't particularly care for in this book was the fact that it really doesn't live up to its description, in my opinion. Yes, I would say that the majority of the book is around the tragedy. That does take up a good deal of the book. But you don't even come upon the tragedy or even understand what that tragedy is until about halfway through the book, which means you spend almost half the book just talking about Abed Salama, who I've already said I don't actually find to be a very likable individual. So I found that hard to really understand and really appreciate in the pacing of the book. And if you're going to spend half the book trying to give me details about this one individual, I think you should also just give me better background information as to what's going on in the West Bank and why exactly Abed Salama is in the situation he's in. I felt like it was a little too specific to one person and didn't give enough broad information to better understand the situation. Who would I recommend this book for? I think to really appreciate it, you definitely have to have some understanding of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'm not talking about just what's going on right now. I'm talking decades worth of it, possibly to the very beginning of it in the 1940s. That alone is going to eliminate a fair amount of people I realize that the world over has strong opinions about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but I also think that most people don't actually have a very thorough knowledge of it, and I think that that might make this a challenge for someone to read. Also, if you're hoping to get more insights into the way things are currently working, or even were working at the time of the tragedy, I think that that was meant to be a purpose of the book, was to try and give you an idea of just how bureaucratic and how problematic the relationship is between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and that's what led to this tragedy. But I actually didn't feel like that was really the case. As I read the book, I could definitely see where there were these moments where the divisions and the basic apartheid made it more likely that there'd be an accident, but at the heart of the book was an accident that by and large didn't seem out of the ordinary. A bus getting into an accident is not unheard of, although as dramatic as it was, and the book tries to show that if there was not such a complicated relationship, that maybe more resources, rescue teams could have been there sooner. But I also got the impression that a lot of the damage was almost instantaneous, and so that also probably didn't play a big role in it. On top of that, a lot of the book is trying to demonstrate just how hard it is for Abed Salama to track down his son, and there's this hope that he could help his son, but that's also totally misleading because the son gets medical attention long before Abed Salama could find him, and it is tragic that Abed Salama doesn't get a chance to say goodbye, but that doesn't change the fact that the medical professionals were more capable of helping his son anyway, so he would not have been able to do anything additional. And I just didn't feel like that really showed through in the book, but maybe I misunderstood some of the timeline. Maybe the book just focused on certain things and it made me forget how big of a timeline it was trying to demonstrate. I would recommend this to someone that is ready and willing to engage with a real tragedy, but they also have to have some kind of understanding of the situation, and they would have to be open-minded to understanding that the main character himself is not a particularly likable person, but that doesn't change the fact that at the heart of the book is a tragedy that is really painful to read about and really devastating when you consider the impact that it had on not just the parents of the child that was lost, but on a whole community. I would say that if you are interested in all those caveats, this book very much could be for you. Otherwise, I suspect for most people, this will be just a little too challenging to read, and you may come away not feeling like you got a whole lot of additional information when it comes to the situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians in the West Bank. I am very curious as to what other people had to say about this book, and if you think that I have mischaracterized it in any way, please let me know. I would definitely like to have someone who has a different idea, different thoughts on how exactly you should engage with this book and how you should interpret both the book itself as well as the purpose of the book, and really who you think the audience of the book was, because I think that was something that I just couldn't quite figure out when I finished the book. Please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.